video, we're going to be taking a look at carbohydrates. This is one of the 4 macromolecules, or large molecules. It was also an example of a polymer. So remember that a polymer is made up of small pieces that when you bond them together create something larger, and that larger object is the polymer. So for carbohydrates and sugars, one of the things that can help you recognize a carbohydrate if you see a name of it is the ending OSE. Glucose, galactose, fructose. Now, not every single sugar ends in OSE, but many of them do. The monomer for a carbohydrate is a monosaccharide. Remember, monomer is small. So these are small objects, small chemicals, and literally mono means one. So monosaccharide literally means one sugar. Saccharide is a word for sugar. And so this is a monosaccharide, this one chemical right here. That's as small as a sugar can be. We also have a certain ratio when it comes to carbohydrates. They are made up of only 3 elements, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and you find them in this particular ratio, a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you have 6 carbons, you double the amount of hydrogens, you'd have 12, and then another 6 oxygens. So a 1-to-1 ratio. I already mentioned the elements that make up a monosaccharide, and that's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And then you have some examples there. Glucose, galactose, fructose. You can see examples here on your screen of those pictures. Galactose is the sugar found in milk. Glucose would be the sugar that you deal with internally, your blood sugar. Fructose is fruit sugar. It's found in fruits. Now, because we know that you can take a monomer and you can bond it to another monomer, we can create larger carbohydrates. And so a disaccharide, the prefix di, is 2. So you have 2 sugars that are joined together here in order to create the larger sugar. And we join those by dehydration synthesis. So remember, you have maybe glucose here and glucose here. And if you take out water, then you create a bond that holds those 2 together. So all of these were bonded together by dehydration synthesis. They lost a water. We could add water to all of these. We have to make a water in order to bond the 2 smaller monosaccharides together. Just some examples. Maltose down here, it's 2 glucose molecules bonded together. Sucrose, which would be table sugar, what you're maybe sprinkle on your Rice Krispies or something in the morning, what you use for baking. Sucrose, that is glucose and fructose. So it's a fruit sugar with a glucose is kind of the most common monosaccharide we think of. And then lactose would be a glucose and a galactose. So you can bond them in all sorts of different arrangements. You get different disaccharides depending on what you bond together. Now if we go a step bigger, we have polysaccharides. Poly, that prefix means many. Good one to know. So a polysaccharide is many sugars. You can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Lots. Okay? Many in order to create a polysaccharide. Sometimes it might be, 2-300. It could be 2-3,000. So polysaccharides really vary, but they all have one thing in common, and that is that they have many glucoses bonded together. Some examples. Starch is a really common one. Starch can come from plants. It's what plants use to store their energy. And some examples would be amylose. Notice the OSE ending there. And amylopectin. That one doesn't end in OSE, so they don't always, but many of them do. So those are specifically starches that are in plants. Plants use that starch then to give themselves energy. And they store that in a very specific structure called a plastid. So that's something that plant cells have, animals don't. And they store their starch in that plastid. And the job of starch, this is the job of starch, energy. Carbohydrates are an energy source for you. Another polysaccharide. These are all polysaccharide examples. Glycogen. Glycogen is specifically in animals. Plants do not have this one. Animals do. And so this is our energy source. When we store extra individual glucose molecules, our body will bond them all together into this long chain, and our body then stores that long chain, glycogen, as an energy source for when we need it. We store glycogen in two places. Guarantee you need to know these, and that is in your liver and in your muscles. Muscles constantly are needing a good supply of energy as they're really working a lot, and so we have that glycogen stored in the muscles for energy use. And unless you replace it, glycogen's used up in a day. So this is why we need to eat on a daily basis. We need that energy on a daily basis. It does get used up. And the last slide talks about a few other types of polysaccharides, ones that maybe we don't hear as often. And one of those is cellulose. Cellulose is a very important component to the cell wall in a plant. We'll talk about the cell wall when we do our unit on cells. So you'll hear cellulose again, notice the OSE ending, and it's how plants get their structure. So the cellulose is what holds the shape of the cell, gives it support. Humans cannot digest cellulose, so when we eat plant material, like celery for instance, we can't digest that cellulose, so it passes through our body as fiber. When you hear people say, oh, you need to get more fiber in your diet, you can get that through eating more plant material, so fruits and vegetables. And then lastly, we have chitin. It's pronounced with a K, not a CH, so it's chitin. And these are used, this is a type of polysaccharide used by arthropods. You would think of it like an insect. And here you can see like a cicada, and they get rid of their exoskeleton as they grow. They kind of shed that exoskeleton, and that is all, this whole exoskeleton here that they're leaving behind is made of chitin, which is a carbohydrate. So those are just some examples of polysaccharides, and that finishes our video on carbohydrates.